Welcome, everyone, to the Zorich Podcast. I am Chris Zorich, and on today's show, we have a Notre Dame alum, class president, national best-selling author, Emmy Award-winning producer, and chief wagon officer at Radio Flyer, and fellow classmate, Robert Pasin. What's up, man?
Hey, Chris. Great to be with you.
All right. Long time no see. It's been a couple of years, I know. So. You know, you have a phenomenal story, and I think it's great because, I mean, the responsibility of being an iconic brand for over 100 years is just amazing, and in being the head of that brand, I'm sure is I mean, an amazing responsibility. But before we get into that, I want to talk about kind of like when you were a kid, because I'm assuming that you had a bunch of toys. I'm assuming that you had a bunch of wagons laying around. Like, were you aware, like what at what age were you aware that, like, hey, we're the wagon family?
Yeah, it took a little time, actually. I think I remember one time my dad brought home a new product. He would bring home new products. Sometimes he'd bring home prototypes. And
okay.
Our house was on a little bit of a hill. And so one time in the early 70s, he brought home this new wagon called the Fireball 2000. And the Fireball 2000 was like a muscle car inspired wagon.
Oh my God.
It was yellow and it had big wheels, and we would take that thing down the hill and crash. And it was very, very fun. But I think the first time I really realized, that our family was associated with Radio Flyer was the first time my dad brought me to work with him. And
okay.
I was just 5 years old. I was home from school because I had broken my arm. So my dad's like, well, I'll bring him to work with me. So I was walking around with him in the building, holding his big hand with my arm in a cast. And I just remember everything seemed so big, and the sound of the punch presses stamping out the wagons and the smell of paint and all of these shiny red wagons were on the conveyor line going across the ceiling. And it just seemed like this kind of magical Rube Goldberg machine that was cranking out these little red wagons. And that's really when I started to really fall in love with it and realize that we were part of something really cool.
That's awesome, man. It was kind of like Willy Wonka, like you're waiting for like candy to come out, right? I mean, that's amazing. Okay, so now that you're a young kid, hanging out in Chicago, the idea, I mean, and I know that you've had family to attend Notre Dame, right?
Yeah,
so
my dad went there.
Was that something that was kind of, were you forced to go to Notre Dame, or was it like, hey, if you want, or did you go to games? I mean, like, what was the feel, and how did you end up at Notre Dame?
Well, my dad is a very low key guy. My dad is 90 years old now, so he was never this like hardcore wearing the green pants, kind of Notre Dame fan.
Okay.
But I remember being like, 10 or 11 years old and finding his old Notre Dame jacket, those, the blue jacket with the yellow sleeves in the closet. And I was like, oh, what is this? And I thought it was so cool. It was kind of this retro thing from the 50s. And I started wearing this jacket, and it was like too big for me. And it's kind of goofy as it sounds. That's when I started to be like, oh, wow, Notre Dame was really cool. It was because I found this jacket. So then I started asking him about his experience at Notre Dame. And he just had a wonderful experience there. And so my dad was a freshman in 1948, and his hall rector was Father Hesburgh before he was president of the university. And my dad speaks fluent Italian because his parents are from Italy, and Father Hesburgh had just come back from Rome, studying in Rome, and he wanted to practice his Italian. So they would speak Italian together, and they got to be good friends, and they were lifelong friends. And then when we were students there, as you know, Father Hesburgh was retired, and his office on the top floor of the library. And so my dad would send me back to campus with boxes of cigars for Father Hesburgh and say, tell him it's from Mario. And I would bring the cigars up to him, and Father Hesburgh would try to speak Italian to me, but I didn't know any Italian. So I would just deliver the cigars, and it was really cool because I got to know him a little bit.
That is hilarious. So, and it's funny because when I lived in Soren, Monk Malloy was the president / he lived like right down the hall, right? And so obviously we didn't have too many parties in Soren, but it was interesting because Father Hesburgh was around still. And I remember going back when I was much older, and I'm a cigar smoker, and I would bring him a box of cigars. So that is so cool, man. And it was interesting because he would engage in a conversation with you, and I mean, he had a meeting, and I know a secretary was like, you have to go. And I'm trying to leave. He's like, no, Chris, and he's puffing on a cigar. He's like, oh, these are great cigars. I mean, so he was an amazing, amazing man.
Yeah.
So when you're now at Notre Dame, and were you always thinking about politics? I mean, about being the class president. How does that work out? Do you, as a freshman, you show up and say, well, my dad was a class president, I want to be the class president?
Yeah, no, my dad wasn't a class president. He was not. He's a very more
low key, right?
More introverted. As I was kind of thinking about like how would I carve out my place on campus, as a freshman, I was so clueless, and I knew I wasn't going to be an athlete like you, and I knew I wasn't going to be the top kid in the class, so I started just looking at different activities, and I saw there was a sign for being a freshman class rep for our dorm.
Okay.
So I signed up for that, and then I became the freshman class rep for Alumni Hall.
Nice.
And I started learning then about class government. And so when second semester, when the posters went up this was again posters going up, right? No internet. Posters went up about, hey, you want to run for class office? I talked to a few of my friends that I had met on this freshman class council from different dorms, and we were very strategic about the geography of, and one other guy and two women on the ticket. And we ran, and there were 13 tickets, and it was very kind of a free for all. And fortunately, we ended up winning. And I attribute it to the fact that we knocked on more doors than anybody else. We were very, very.
There you go. Wow, like literally like a grassroots kind of going from door to door.
Yes.
So, when you think about your experience at Notre Dame, what are the highlights? And were there any kind of lowlights?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the highlights for me were all related to student government, because I just got so involved with that, and I made so many friends, and really because of that campaigning door to door, I met so many people. So I knew so many people in our class, and I learned a lot. So I was class president sophomore year and junior year, and then student body president senior year. And so I made so many close friends, like my running mate, Fred, for student body president. He was vice president. We present topics to the board of trustees when like issues that, were concern of students, like things like on-campus safety and diversity on campus. And so it was just an incredible learning opportunity, and had so many great mentors. And I think lowlights, it was just really, I didn't have many lowlights. It was just a really, really wonderful experience for me.
The one thing I ask people is, was there a moment for you throughout your time there when it was kind of like, wow, I'm at Notre Dame? Or, was it an aha moment? Or was it kind of like, it's snowing, it's, real early in the morning, you happen to be walking down a grotto, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, you get this picture and got tears in your eyes, things like that. Did you ever have any moments like that?
Yeah, I did. I was totally drinking the Kool-Aid. I would walk around campus. A lot of times I would think about my dad walking around campus, and I just thought it was so cool that, my dad had walked these same sidewalks, and I was pretty aware of that and very grateful to be able to experience it. The grotto, like the senior class last mass and trip to the grotto, I remember that really fondly. And, we all got those candles, and I had that candle for years after that. So yeah, I used to when being student body president, I one of my roles was to bring out the flag for a football game, and I did it once, and it was really cool. But I thought, this is really cool. So then I gave it to other people to do, like who had worked in student government and stuff, and actually people who were really intense Notre Dame football fans that would get even a bigger charge out of being on the field than me. So, yeah, there's just so many memories. It's hard for me to even kind of categorize them. I'm just giving you a stream of consciousness right now. Sure.
So how pumped was your dad when you decided to go there and kind of got that involved? I mean, I know he was kind of low key, but was there a sense of pride for him as well?
Yeah, they were. So my parents were both really, really into it. They were on a council at the time on campus. So they were on this church life council. So they would come there for meetings, and then we'd go to dinner. And they absolutely loved it. I mean, one of the high points for them was Junior Parents Weekend. I got to do a speech at that event. And, that was my mom has often said that was, just one of her most kind of glorious moments. Oh,
wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. Because they had Notre Dame had been such a huge part of their lives for so many years. So we really, really just cherished and loved that time.
That's awesome. That is awesome. So and I know that you're really involved in service. Did that idea happen there? Or was it something that kind of your family had been involved in?
Yeah, my parents had always, I think it really started with my parents. They did a lot growing up. And they never preached about it. They never said you should do service. They just did it. They really led by example. And I remember our parish kind of adopted an immigrant family from Cambodia in the 80s. And my parents were really involved with getting them set up with an apartment and having them over to our house for dinner. And it was never a big deal. It was just part of what they did. So I saw that as an example. And then at Notre Dame, I found the Center for Social Concerns, right. And I would do a lot through them. And that really inspired me to think more about, the idea of I've been given so much in my life. I've been so fortunate. How can I give back a little bit? And so that's why I decided after I graduated, I did a year of volunteer work teaching on the west side of Chicago in the Austin neighborhood.
Right. So I want to talk about that. Was that like a Teaching for America program, or what was that?
Similar to it. It's a local program in Chicago called a Mate House. So it's a volunteer program through the Archdiocese of Chicago.
And you spent a lot of time there, obviously, and possibly met someone there?
Yes, my joke is that I met my wife in a convent, but she wasn't a nun. So we were all there were 15 of us volunteers living in a convent on the south side of Chicago. So that was our housing because it was free housing. And the nuns weren't there anymore, so it was a convent that didn't use anymore. It was all of us were volunteers. We lived together in community. There was a lot of social justice reflection and education through the program. I taught sixth grade. My wife worked for the I Have a Dream Foundation, which helped inner city kids get to college.
Okay.
And we started the year and just became friends over the course of the year. And by the end of the year, we were dating, and a couple years later, we were married.
Wow, that's awesome. That's great story. So, when you think about, had you planned on doing that year of service? Or was it, hey, I've accomplished these great things at Notre Dame, student body president. I have an idea of what I want to do. Should I just take some time off? Like what was that process?
Well, I knew at that point, I wanted to go into the family business and come into Radio Flyer. I had worked here summers growing up, and I knew I wanted to at least try it to see if it would be a good fit for me and a good match. And so that was very nice that I knew I had that, and that really made it a lot easier to do that year of volunteer work.
What did you learn from that experience?
Well, I learned a ton. I went into it really cocky, thinking, I'm going to change the world, and I'm going to change. I'm going to change these kids' lives, and they're going to be raising their hand and engaged in class, and we're going to sing songs together, and it's going to be like, Lean on Me or something. And I realized that, I was not the teacher, I was the student that year. That was my main learning. And it was very humbling. It exposed me to a lot of issues that in my sheltered life, I hadn't experienced before: inner city poverty, just a lot of those kind of challenges, and seeing them show up in the classroom, kids who hadn't eaten breakfast, or, all those kind of things. And it was a real eye opener, and it made me understand, some of those are some of my early learnings around systemic racism and things like that. So it was just incredibly humbling. I also learned I don't like teaching grade school. And the discipline part of it was really exhausting, because I remember when I was getting my classroom ready, one of the 8th grade teachers, I was teaching 6th grade, came by and said, "Okay, I have one piece of advice for you. You cannot smile until Valentine's Day." And I was like, "Are you serious?" And she's like, "No, if you smile, they're going to take advantage of you. The class is going to go crazy." Wow. And I smile a lot. So that was,
oh my gosh,
that took a lot of energy for me to be like, this serious, have this serious presence and all the organization in the class. And so
did you eventually understand what she was talking about, or?
Yes, I mean, I found my own way that I could smile, but there was a certain degree of, we really had to just have kind of your game face, really, and not letting it get out of control. So I think, I navigated it so that I felt like I was a little bit more fun maybe than that approach.
It's really interesting. One of the things I found when I've done service, kind of like when you were talking about, you have this idea of, hey, this is what I'm going to do. This is what they need. Yeah. I'm the savior. This is what's going to be great. And you get there and it's like, whoa, we need pencils, or whoa, we need snacks, because they haven't. And it was just kind of one of those humbling things for me, because I kind of grew up in that environment, and I thought I knew. So I could imagine coming from Notre Dame and wanting to do well and walking in there and saying, okay, let's go ahead. I'm going to teach these kids. And then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, I have to bring snacks, because some of these kids hadn't even eaten.
Yes, for sure. That's so true. I was putting together, I was a history major, and that was my main subject that I was teaching. And so I had all these grand ideas of, this is how I'm going to teach the Roman Empire, and we're going to read a novel, and we're going to do this. And I realized the first time I went to collect papers, the class just went insane, because I had no system for collecting papers. So it was really to focus on the basics and the fundamentals first.
Okay, so you have a chance to meet a young lady. You finish that. You're now kind of making that leap, I guess, into adulthood, let's say. And what's the conversation with your family, with your dad? Is it something that was a given? Hey, you're gonna come in here and you're gonna do this, or was it like, hey, are you ready? Or was it, hey, I think this is an opportunity for me. I'm not sure. Let me try it. How was that?
Yeah, my dad really had the approach that his approach was for all of us kids. If you want to come into the business, you're welcome. Nobody's forced to come into the business. And because he was the only son of my grandpa who started the company, and being a kind of a traditional Italian guy from day one, it was like, Mario, you're going into the business. You got to take over the business. So It was really forced on him. So he didn't want to do that to us. And so, but at a really early age, I was really interested in the business. From that very first visit I described, and then working their summers, I fell in love with this creative process of making products, turning things like steel and wood and plastic into, delightful products for families. And I saw just huge potential, because we had this amazing brand that generations of people had grown up with, and we weren't really leveraging that brand like we could. So I saw a huge opportunity. I had been very clear to my dad I wanted to try it. We didn't have an HR team at the time. We didn't have any formal internship programs. So, there was very little structure. So he's like, well, you're you're good at campaigning and stuff, so why don't you start in sales?
Oh my gosh.
So I started on the sales team. I was just working for a VP of sales who had been here for many years, who was close to retirement, and he mentored me, and I followed him around to all the appointments and accounts and everything. And that's how I really started learning about customer relationships and and started learning about the business.
So you have an amazing journey, kind of from this 22-year-old kid walking in. Share with us a little bit about kind of your first eye-opening experience. I've had a chance to read and watch some other interviews you've done. I think it's really interesting, kind of at a very young age, you were able to get a realization of kind of where the company stood.
Yeah, I mean, one of my earliest times after I started the company was my dad said, "Hey, Robert, come here. I want you to meet Jerry. He's here from the bank." And so Jerry sat me down, and he's just got really red faced. He started yelling at me, saying, "You have no cash. Do you get it? You guys have no cash." And he was staring at me, and I didn't say anything for a minute. And then I was like, "Well, how much cash are you supposed to have?" And he just started laughing because he realized this kid is totally clueless. He doesn't know anything about business. But he was a workout guy from the bank because we were having financial problems. And, all companies have their ups and downs. And, we'd been in business at that point for 70 years. So we'd had a lot of good years. We were in a down period. And it was through a combination of things. We'd had some products that hadn't worked. The company had accumulated quite a bit of debt. And so we were really in crisis at that moment. And I didn't really realize how challenging it was. So it was an incredible opportunity for me because we were really small. It's our family business. So I got thrown into all these meetings and discussions and talking about what are we going to do to turn this thing around. So it was this incredible learning opportunity. It was a little scary, but because I was so green and clueless, I didn't know how scary it was. And so that was really the situation that I entered.
Wow. So, I mean, was it more kind of like you're thinking, are we okay? Are we going to lose the house? I mean, are we going to be able to eat? I mean, are we kind of like, whoa, what's going on? I'm only 22.
Well, yes, that was my MO. And so then I would say to my dad, well, this guy, Jerry, just said we're going to go out of business. And he's like, oh, I think it will be okay. Don't worry about it. And I was like, really? There seems to be a disconnect here. And that was why Jerry was shaking me and yelling at me, to kind of shock the system. But yeah, I mean, we had this basic product, the steel and wood wagons that had sold great for a long time. And, but plastic wagons had come out, which offered new features, like you could put cup holders in them, you could put seats for the kids, and they were quickly killing our cash cow, which was the country wagon, which was a great seller for 30 years. So that was, we were in this weakened condition. Then we had this competitive threat, and it really caused us to start soul searching and asking all those questions, like, what are we? Are we a manufacturer? Are we a brand? Yes, we know we've made steel and wood wagons, but what does Radio Flyer really mean to people? And by digging deeper and asking those questions, we started to uncover the core brand attributes. Like when people would talk about Radio Flyer, they would smile and they tell a story, and there's these warm stories about childhood, and they're about playing outside, using your imagination. And so we started to think, well, it's not. We went from we make wagons to we bring smiles and create warm memories that last a lifetime. What else can we do? What other products can we make that make sense with that?
So was it hey, I'm a history major, I can do R&D, let me see what I can do? Or were you kind of like, guys, we need to put our heads together? I mean, I know you didn't take over the responsibilities of chief wagon officer until later, but I mean, in the beginning, before you got that position, were you just doing everything? Were you trying to sell everything?
Well, I wasn't doing everything, but it was a very small team, and I was involved in a lot of things, and I was kind of running around a little bit like a chicken with his head cut off, just, trying to stop, trying to, do whatever I could. And so we were experimenting a lot, and I was looking for anything else we could sell. My main goal at that point was, how do we boost sales? Because we got to get sales going, or else we're goners. And I specifically remember one time I was looking, grasping at straws, and I would ask our customer service person, is anybody asking for anything that they want from us that we don't have? And she said, well, actually, we've been getting some calls for people who want these wagons with big air tires.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, wow, have we ever done that? And everyone's like, no, we've never done that. So we got the tire supplier, got the tires. I mean, it was very just scrambling around, very scrappy. Put them on this wagon, and I got really excited. I thought it looked great. It pulled easier. It was softer. It had, and so our biggest customer at the time was Toys R Us. So I went to Toys R Us, and I'm presenting this wagon to our buyer. Her name was Bobby, and I was selling all the features, getting really excited about it. When all of a sudden the door opens up, and Bobby's boss walks in, Marty, and Marty doesn't even look at me, and he just says to Bobby, "What are you doing?" And she said, oh, I'm meeting with Radio Flyer. They're showing us this new wagon. And he said, Radio Flyer? They're not even on the first page of my vendor report anymore. Why are you wasting your time meeting with them? And then he's like, so how much is this wagon? I started selling it to him. He's like, that's not going to sell. Don't waste your time. And he left and slammed the door. And that was really the low point for me, because I thought our biggest customer, our most important person at our biggest customer, thinks we're completely irrelevant. And I went to bed that night thinking we are going out of business. But, I was so committed. And again, the cluelessness helped, because I didn't know how, really how tough it was. I was so committed. I just thought, come hell or high water, we are going to figure this out. We've got this great brand. We got to be more creative. We have to be more committed, and we have to figure it out.
So you wound up taking over the chief wagon officer responsibilities in 97.
Yeah.
And your dad had been doing it before you.
Yes.
What's that kind of, you want to improve, but there's like, hey, my dad didn't do this, but he's my dad. Like how do, and I'm assuming you had to evaluate everybody, your senior staff, everyone there. What type of changes did you do, but were they done in a respectful way, or did you even make those changes?
Yeah, we ultimately changed everything. We completely changed everything, the entire team, the way we develop products, but it took time. Time. I had to learn a lot. It was a steep learning curve for me. But, for my dad, my dad and I always had a really good relationship, even though we're really different people. And I really respected the work that he had done and kept the company going for many years. But he was a reluctant CEO. It wasn't his passion. And he actually did an amazing job. I can't imagine doing what he did, it not being his passion.
Right.
But for me, it was my passion. And the one of the things I'm the most grateful for is that he just let me do it. He said, go for it. You got to do what you have to do to make it a success. And I support you completely. And that was just an incredible gift to get at such a young age. So yeah, we've just really, the way we turned it around is one product at a time and one person at a time. We'd come out with a product, and that would start selling pretty well. And then we would use that, these additional earnings to hire a really good talent. But it took years. It took at least, 10 years really to kind of stop the bleeding, stabilize the patient, and start to really grow. Okay.
So talking about product, at what point did Angel Love Wagon Babies come along?
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. Yes, no, that happened early on. That was in the 90s. And I always say to people, do you remember this hit doll of the 1990s, Angel Love Wagon Babies? And they're always kind of like, oh, I don't think so. And I'm like, no, you don't, because it was a total failure. Yeah, that's one of my favorite product failure stories that I tell to everybody who joins the company. And it really was born out of a product success. So we had this little wagon that was about this big. Actually, it's right up there.
Okay, gotcha.
And it was selling like crazy, and we saw that people were putting dolls and stuffed animals in it. So we said, hey, let's do our own doll in a wagon. came up with this backstory that you mentioned, Angel Love Wagon Babies. So these angels make these babies just for you and send it down to earth. And
in a wagon.
In a wagon, of course. And we got really excited about this idea, even though it sounds crazy. But I was really worried. So I'm like, we don't know anything about dolls. We've never done dolls. So let's do market research. So we hired a market research firm. We did focus group testings with moms. Moms went crazy for the idea. They loved it. They said that we will buy this. It'll be huge. We thought, oh my God, we're going to have this hit product. We made this commercial, spent tons of money on it, and it was a total failure. Oh. And I learned so much. I like to say I got 2 MBAs that year. One was from Kellogg and one was from Angel Love Wagon Babies. and the thing that I learned from that was that, the product we came out with had nothing to do with our brand, really. It didn't make sense on the radio flyer. The second thing was in the market research, we made all kinds of classic market research mistakes. Like, we went into this research looking for it's called confirmation bias, looking for all the things that would be positive, but we missed all the other things that people said about, well, maybe the price was too high, or maybe the doll looked a little strange, and we didn't pay attention to that. So huge learnings, very humbling experience.
So now at this point, you mentioned you got your MBA. I mean, how did you have the time for that? I mean, you were teaching school right after college. So you also went you got your MBA as well?
I did it at night. So in the first years, I did it at night. There's a lot of time in the day, Chris. If you cut out, TV.
Really?
There's a lot of time.
You still got homework to do. I mean, you got to go back to the office in the morning.
I know, but that's all I did. So
it's amazing. Wow. So I'm going to jump to 2004. And you guys have been at the same location, stamping out this iconic brand. Mm-hmm. And in 2004, you guys make a decision. Mm-hmm. Can you kind of walk us through this literally huge decision that you guys had to make?
Yeah. I mean, you're referring to when we shut down the factory in Chicago. And yeah, that was definitely the hardest business decision I've had to make. But it was one that was coming for a long time. So as we developed our own plastic wagons, we made them outside of our factory here. We made them in Wisconsin. As we developed other products like tricycles and scooters, we made those in China. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, steel wagon sales were declining. So this factory that we had could make 2 million steel wagons a year. And by the early 2000s, it was making less than 500,000 wagons a year. So it was becoming increasingly apparent that we just couldn't keep the operation going. We couldn't cover the overhead. And so for several years, we had early retirement programs and things like that to try to reduce the workforce. Okay. But then ultimately, we just decided that we couldn't support that business anymore in that way. We really wanted to focus on design and product development. And so we just were very clear with everybody who was losing their jobs. We explained why. We took them through the financials. We announced it in March, and the shutdown wasn't until August. So we gave everyone very long lead times. We did outplacement service. We had generous severance. So we tried to do it as well as we possibly could. Okay. But it was still very, very painful, and people lost their jobs from it. Sure. But if we hadn't done it, we wouldn't still be in business. So it was definitely, something that we had to do to survive.
So I'm sure it was a very hard, trying time for you at the time. Did your dad kind of chime in and kind of talk to you, or hey, these are people that have been with us for literally all their lives? And I mean, what was the relationship with, and I know it's something that you guys had to do, but was your dad kind of back there kind of helping you out with some advice and how to talk to everybody?
Yes, he said all those things, and I had worked with everyone in the factory since I was 18. So This was not a distant, wasn't making a phone call, shutting down a factory in a different state or something. I mean, it was, it was real. These were real people that we had real relationships with. And, his main advice to me was just be honest and tell the truth. And you have relationships with everyone. They know that, it's something that has to be done. So the reaction wasn't anger as much as just sadness and resignation. And I think one of the things that happened that was unusual was that when we announced it and the newspaper article ran about it, then TV news crews came to our parking lot looking for those kind of nasty sound bites for the evening news, and not one person said anything negative about the company. And I think that's really because we treated people with respect, integrity, and honesty.
That is huge. So it's interesting. I had a chance to spend some time on your website. So I'm actually going to put that up because did you come up with the design of the new building? Because literally it looks like Google ran it to Toys R Us or something. It's awesome. So if folks listening, if you have a chance, please go to the website and check out where their building is now. I mean, that's where you go to work every day. That's awesome.
Yes, it is. Well, we work with Gensler architecture firm to do the design. And they did an amazing job. And we're in the same building. We've been in since the 30s. We have this very cool factory building that we converted into this really innovative, unique, creative workspace that we are all looking forward to getting back to when we can.
I could imagine. It's actually going to lead me to our first kind of guest question, which is from Derek Phillips. What does it take to run a family-owned business in these challenging times?
Mm-hmm. I think it's the same, really, even if it's not challenging times, there's always different challenges. I think it's clarity of purpose, knowing our purpose is to bring smiles and create warm memories that last a lifetime. That's our mission. Everything flows from that. We have really strong values. We call our values the Little Red Rule, which is every time we touch people's lives, they'll feel phenomenal. And we spell phenomenal with an F-U-N.
Nice.
So those are really real things. At the beginning of 2020, when we were all faced with the COVID crisis and the pandemic, I said, our culture is our strategy. That is what gets us through these things. It's how we work together. It's the shared values. It's our shared commitment to our mission. And that's what our team really did throughout the whole last year. And they did an amazing job.
Well, I want to spend some time talking about culture and leadership in the second half of the show. But before we go to break, I want to talk about my favorite part of the book, which is kind of over my right. Over here. First of all, I loved it. How did you become an author? Was that something that you always wanted to do? Or, I know it's kind of celebrating 100 years, but did somebody say, hey, do this? Or were you like, hey, I think we should do this?
Well, I wanted to do it, but I hired a really good writer that actually did most of the writing. So I was more the conductor.
Well, the photos in there are great. And that's something else I want to talk about in the second half. And you mentioned it earlier, when people either hear where you're from or when they hear the words radio flyer, they instantly go back to their childhood. And I think one of the things that it reminds me of is the old Orson Welles movie with was it Rosebud?
Yeah.
When the guy's sitting with the snowball. Right. And I think when you could ask, because I remember I had one. We wound up getting it from a garage sale, but that literally was my rocket ship, my horse, my go-kart, my car, and it was fun. Now, I learned how to change a tire on there, so to speak, and there were screws and bobby pins for the wheels and everything. It was great. But one of the things that I loved about the book was the huge risk your grandfather took for the World's Fair in 1933. Can you share a little bit about this? Because this is something that hadn't been done before and wound up actually maybe being kind of the impetus for you later on building a large wagon. But this is 1933. You guys don't have a lot of cash, and he comes up with this grand idea.
Yeah, it was a big risk. It was a watershed event. The World's Fairs at that time were these huge, huge events that it's hard for us to probably even imagine pre-internet, pre-TV even, when all the new innovations and inventions would be showcased. And so it was coming to Chicago in 1933. my grandpa had been making this steel wagon called the Radio Flyer for just a few years. And he thought, wow, there's going to be millions of people coming here. This is an incredible opportunity. I want to build an exhibit worthy of the fair. And so, but to do that took some money. And so he had to take out a loan from the bank. And he hired this really great Art Deco designer named Alfonso Iannelli to design this really eye-catching sculpture of a boy. It was a 50-foot tall boy riding a wagon, and underneath the wagon there was a little shop where they made miniature wagons and sold them for 25 cents as souvenirs. And my grandma later told me that it was one of the few times that she ever saw my grandpa really stressed out, like laying in bed at night thinking, oh my gosh, what did I do? Am I insane here to try to do this during the Depression? But it turned out to be an incredible publicity success. It really brought the Radio Flyer brand to millions of people. And we kind of view that as really the birth of the Radio Flyer brand.
This is Chris Zorich. Being part of some very successful teams, what I valued most was the collaboration and the chance to work toward common goals. Comar, derived from the Gaelic word meaning collaboration. Comar Partners is a recognized leader in retained executive search, professional recruiting, and talent advisory services. We are trusted advisors to our clients. We view our work on behalf of our clients as mission critical, and with the knowledge that a great resulting hire will have a direct effect on our clients' businesses. It's time to collaborate, cultivate, and connect. Why choose Comar Partners? The difference is clear. We lean in and have a tenacious approach to our work through innovation, knowledge management, process execution, and an industry-leading team of professionals. As part of every search, we provide a compensation analysis, a third-party executive assessment, and one-on-one onboarding and acculturation coaching. Welcome back. You're listening to the Zorich Podcast with our guest, Robert Pasin. If you'd like to watch this interview along with our other interviews, please check out my website at Chris Zorich 50 and click subscribe when you go to YouTube. So you have an amazing presence in social media. And I'm on social media now, and I think kind of taking that step where you guys might not have been there in the past, but really kind of sending out some great messages and talks about culture and leadership and everything. But before I get into that, I'm going to go back just a little bit and talk about the name Radio Flyer. I mean, where did that come from?
Yeah, well, the first wagon my grandpa made was out of wood because, like you said, he was a cabinet maker, and he called that the Liberty Coaster because the first thing he saw when he came here was the Statue of Liberty. And he was always really inspired by the promise of America and technology and inventions, and his idols were Thomas Edison and people like that. So when he made the first steel wagon, he wanted to just have a really, really cool name. So he picked the most innovative products of the day, the radio and the airplane. So Radio Flyer, and you put them on the wagon. It had nothing to do with the product, really. It was just a cool sounding name. So I like to say if he were naming it today, he'd call it something like the Quantum AI Dronester, or something equivalent to that. So, yeah.
It's really interesting when you think about kind of your responsibility and what you've done as the CEO and kind of taking it into the future, so to speak, right? So you mentioned before when you were a kid, your dad brought home a prototype yellow with fire. It was like the whatever 2000. That was going to be the future. So now you're there. And, you're talking about e-commerce, you're talking about websites. I mean, how do you bring an iconic brand that people get excited about, they smile, they have the warm and fuzzies? I mean, how do you bring that up to speed? And we'll talk a little bit about kind of new ventures with what's over your shoulder in a Tesla car, which is amazing. But I mean, what's that process? How do you go from, hey, now we have a great kick-ass building, we're We're on the way. Now we have to bring people in. Now we have to get excited about products. And you talked about, and I think which is great, when you talk about your failures, they're great learning experiences for you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, early on, I realized that if we were going to survive, let alone thrive, we had to really amp up product development and start coming out with a lot of new products in order to grow. And I found that we had permission from consumers to do that with our brand if it was the right product. And so I just started talking to consumers a lot, listening to them, asking questions. And very early on, and this was a lot of very informal research, we weren't spending money on it, but just talking to anybody I would meet, I'd say, well, tell me about the radio flyer you had as a kid. And they would, of course, talk about their wagon, but oftentimes they would say, I had a radio flyer tricycle. And I say, wow, really? Tell me about that. And they say, yeah, it was red, it was shiny, it had chrome, it was a radio flyer. But we never made tricycles. So I thought, oh my gosh, this is an incredible opportunity. People think we already make this product. So, that we did something really smart. We made that product and we gave them all those design cues. They remembered the red, shiny, and the chrome and everything. And then when we put radio flyer on it, people pointed to it and said, that's the radio flyer tricycle. I had it as a kid. And it sold great. That was one of my really first big home run products. And that was a huge shot in the arm because I saw that if we gained a consumer insight and came out with the right product, we could have huge success. So we went from no tricycles now to the number one trike brand in the world. We make more tricycles than anyone else. And we make them in every size. We have stroller tricycles where it starts out where the parent is pushing it like a stroller and then the pieces come off. And all of those innovations really came from our team studying consumers' behavior. And one of the things that I like to say is that, yes, you should listen to the customer, but really you should watch the customer because by watching what they do, in their home, ethnographic research, our team goes into people's garages and in their backyards and they're watching and videotaping and taking pictures. And through that kind of research, we can uncover little problems. And we're not curing cancer here. These are not, but we are solving, day-to-day problems for families. So when we ask a mom who's got two little toddlers to pick up a wagon and put it in the back of their car and observe that, we can see, oh my gosh, if we could make it so that it folds up with one hand, that would solve a nice problem for a parent. And so now folding wagons are some of our best sellers. So really, that is how we built the process and the team to be able to come out with all of the products we have in our product line today.
Well, speaking about the folding wagon, and that being successful for you, that wasn't always the case. So I think what's amazing about you, Rob, is that you are really observant, but more importantly, willing to kind of look at your mistakes and say, hey, let's learn from them. And so can you share with us a little bit about, because a folding wagon is ingenious, right? So how did that come to the point where the wagon is now? Because I remember hearing your story about you guys had this great idea, but it just wasn't ready yet.
Yeah. Well, our head of product development, who's Tom Schlegel, who's also a Notre Dame grad, I found him.
Oh, all right. Go Irish.
Yeah. He was working on a folding wagon really, really early on. And we fell in love with this idea. It was a different mechanism and stuff. We thought, okay, this is going to be the folding wagon, but it had all kinds of challenges. There were problems with the mechanism of how it folded, and we spent a ton of money developing this product. And we had tooled it up, made all the molds. We were ready to ship it to Toys R Us at that time. And it just wasn't where it needed to be. And we looked at it together and I just said, you know what, we can't ship this. It's not the right quality. It doesn't work well enough. But we had sunk a ton of money into it. And I remember Tom later told me he thought he was going to get fired for, and we talked about it later. And we've used that example to say, we're in the consumer product business. There is going to be lots of product failure. So, there's acceptable failure and then there's unacceptable failure. And acceptable failure is when everybody's working really hard. Everybody is, we're shipping it on time, and we're not slacking and those kind of things. Unacceptable failures when we're not learning from our mistakes, or we're not showing up on time, we're not giving it our all. So we can't have that, but we need to learn from those failures where it's a good idea, it's a good product, it just misses the mark. And it's really hard to tell what is going to sell or what's going to succeed, because humans are emotional creatures. It's hard to tell what they're going to do or how they're going to act.
So when you get the idea of having a product, and I got this from looking at some of the pictures on your website, at what stage does it go in front of the kids in like the little playroom where you guys in white coats and right? And so can you kind of explain the process of, let's say, one product and kind of the route it takes?
Sure. Yeah, I think a good example of that would be when we were entering kids' scooters, because we were in and out of scooters for many years throughout our history, but we weren't really in scooters. And so we started looking at that category because we said it's wheels, it's outdoor play, it makes sense for our brand. And as our team started the first thing we do is look at kids riding stuff. So we were looking at all these, and these are little kid scooters. So not the 2-wheel scooters, but scooters that either have 3 wheels or training wheels or 4 wheels, more stable for little guys. And as we looked at them, we saw that all the scooters on the market had 2 wheels in the back. And our team observed that it wasn't a good design because the kids' feet were hitting those wheels. And so they started to just sketch. First thing is sketching. How could we fix this? Well, we could do 2 wheels in front. Maybe they had all different kinds of ideas, different shaped decks. Then we have a prototype shop here in our building where we can make anything. So they can weld anything, they can make anything out of wood. So they start rapid prototyping really fast, nothing fancy, just cutting plywood, putting wheels on it. Okay. And then we test it with kids. We make them rideable, and we start looking what works the best. What are the ergonomics? And then we settled on this design, and then we made a beautiful looking prototype that looks like a real product that would be for sale. And then we present that to the retail customer, and we say, we've done all this research, the kids love riding this, and then we try to sell it in and get it on the shelf or now online. And that whole process resulted in one of the best-selling preschool scooters, and now we have a whole line of them.
Wow. And I'm sure you've had some ideas that have gone that far and just didn't make it.
Oh yeah, just didn't make it, or we actually sold it in, and it was a huge disaster. So a recent example of that was we were doing research on electric cars for kids, these Barbie Jeep and Ford F-150 trucks that are but for kids.
Right.
And we saw, and this was several years ago, so this maybe 5 years ago, there were no Star Wars vehicles, and it was the resurgence and relaunch of Star Wars with Disney. So we pitched Star Wars vehicles for kids. We made Luke Skywalker's land speeder. We launched it at Comic-Con in San Diego. Everybody was going insane that it was the coolest thing at Comic-Con. It got into stores. It died. No sales.
Wow.
So, and sometimes you don't even know exactly, was it the price? Just was there not a big enough fan base for that particular vehicle at that price? Those are some hypotheses we have, but sometimes you don't really fully know why something either doesn't work or does work.
Well, I think it's amazing that you've been so open about learning kind of from your mistakes. And this is going to segue into the idea of the creation of Wagon U. Now, this is something that you started, and the idea of making sure that every employee understands kind of the history, the culture, and also, it's okay to make a mistake.
Yeah. I mean, Wagon U was really the kind of brainchild of our head of HR, Amy, and the rest of the team. Okay. And it's about, even though we're not a huge, Fortune 500 company, how can we have a learning and development program that's truly world-class? And so it is all those things. It's learning about the products. It's, learning about process improvements, manager development training. And we have classes here that all of us teach, all the leaders in the company teach, but then we go to offsites. We have outside training, and really it's about continuing to build our team into this, amazing group of people that's achieving breakthrough results. And so, yeah, we love it. It's a huge part of our culture.
So who's responsible, or not whose responsibility, but whose idea was it to call the employees flyers? Was that something that you kind of thought about one day and woke up, or was it somebody said, hey, you know what? People would be excited if they were a flyer?
Yeah, we just over time, these things all happen over time. We started saying, employee sounds, it's not very fun. So what's something that we can do that's fun, unique, brandable, and also not too corny? And so my team and I, we were doing one of our kind of offsite goal settings, and we started brainstorming, well, what are all the different names we could come up with? And actually, we had dinner, we had drinks, and we all were in love with Wagoneers. We're going to be called Wagoneers. So we all go to bed, and then the next morning we're like, I wrote Wagoneers on the board. I'm like, I don't know, Wagoneers maybe sounds a little corny, and then we're like, how about flyers? Let's just do this straight up.
There you go.
So sometimes it's good to sleep on it. But yeah, that's kind of how those things came about. Just how do we make it unique to us? How do we make it fun? How do we make it playful?
And so one of the things that has been really successful for Radio Flyer, and kind of this understanding of your culture, is your internship program. And it's won awards. It's this really successful program. How did that start, and what was the idea behind it?
Yeah, like everything, it started small, and that's something I wish I had done day one when I started, was to develop an internship program. But it was really Tom, who heads up product development and is now our chief innovation officer. Okay. He said, let's bring in an engineering intern, and because we need help this summer. It was really more about that. And then we quickly realized that it's such a great talent pipeline. So over the years, we've built this really robust program, and a big percentage of our team were interns. And so now, it's just a great way. It's a great way for us to check out the person. It's a great way for the person to check out the company, see if it's a good fit for them. And yeah, we've gotten a lot of awards for the internship program. It's a key part of our talent pipeline.
So this is one of my favorite questions, and I want it coming from you, because you've created this environment where it's not only fun to go to work, I assume, but you've changed the brand with you and your team, and the idea of having a great environment to work in, having a great culture is important. And I think many businesses have employees that may not be happy, that may fail because the culture isn't there. Can you kind of share with us a little bit about creating that culture at Radio Flyer, and what your thoughts were behind it?
Yeah. Well, you're right. I think, Gallup polls show that, more than half of people are disengaged from work. They basically don't like their jobs, which is really, really sad. And so I think, to me, everyone talks about culture, and it seems like this kind of amorphous thing. And really, the culture is just the way you do stuff, and the way you get the work done, and the way you work together. And it's your habits. It's your daily habits as a team. And so I think the most important thing that we have found in building the culture is, who do you select to be on the team?
Okay.
So we have a really rigorous, robust selection process. That's the most important thing, because if we get that right, then those are the people that are going to build your culture. If we're hiring creative, committed, smart, the kind of people we all want to work with, if we're doing a really good job of hiring them, then they create the culture and they design the culture. And that's really what's happened here. And then we really believe that you get better at what you measure, and you become what you celebrate. So we measure the culture. We survey the team. We ask questions. And it's not just about, like, do you guys want a new ping pong table? It's, how well is this other team supporting you? It's asking people for that kind of feedback. and it's being really transparent with what we all do. So we all have goals. We all share our goals with each other, so everybody knows what everybody else is working on. And then we celebrate a lot, and we lift up the behaviors that we want everyone to emulate. So we have the Little Red Rule Award for the person who really demonstrates our values. We have Captain Phenomenal, who gets a cape because
Nice.
they've done something amazing. And so we do tons of that celebration, and it's all about reinforcing the values and recognizing and thanking the people who are doing such a great job.
Now, and it's really interesting because when I think about your grandfather and, coming here and the reputation that he had that I read about, I mean, there were a great man of integrity. There were deals made by handshakes. And although he didn't kind of have these rules of the road back then, right, because he was literally worried about, making wagons, it's interesting how you're able to use kind of those values that were really in your family, and you're able to kind of allow them to really in your working environment. And I think that's a great testament to your grandfather, your dad, your mom, you. And it's interesting, as I was doing the research, I ran across a little interview, a couple-second interview with you and your son. And I thought that was interesting because, you have that iconic story of kind of walking in the first day with your dad, and, smelling the paint and hearing machines. Now, times have changed a little bit. Did you have one of those moments with any of your children?
Yeah, a lot more actually, because this is like a playground now. So it was a factory then. You kids weren't really allowed in the factory. So yeah, now we have our play lab where we test products. We have our test track outside where we ride stuff, and we have bring your kid to work day where this place becomes like playground, amusement park, and so they've had all four of our kids have had a lot of time here, and the older ones have worked here summers in the internship program, and so yeah. So
of course, the next question is, are you putting that pressure on them? I'm being facetious, but I know your dad didn't do it to you. But is it one of those things where, as a family business, you did it, your dad did it? Do your sons feel that, man, this is something I got to do? Or, hey, Dad's really chill about this. I've gone through the program. I like it, but hey, I want to be a musician.
Yeah, I think one of the ways family businesses tend to go wrong is when people feel forced to go into the business. So my approach is you should only go into the family business if it's the right fit for you, if it's something you really love, if you love the work, and you have to be qualified. You can't just default into the family business and flunk out of school and that kind of thing. So everybody's welcome, but you have to meet the criteria. It has to be the right match, and you have to work somewhere else for a while and get other experience. Those are kind of things these are kind of some family business best practices that we didn't do years ago, and I think are really healthy and for everyone.
The idea of taking Radio Flyer to the future, what was the start of the e-commerce part, right? So your own website. I think you coined a phrase, "pimp your wagon," which I think is pretty cool. What's the concept of, hey, can we sell a wagon online? Like that's really not what people do. They go into a store and they feel it. The kid has to jump in it. What was that concept going into kind of that market?
Yeah, well, we first of all, we didn't really want to compete with our customers, Amazon and Walmart and Target and their websites. So we wanted to do something different and unique. And whenever we do a new product or any new initiative, my challenge as a team is always, how can we make it different and better than what we've done before? And so that's really where the Build a Wagon came from. And we took inspiration from Nike ID and places like that and said, all right, well, what if you could design your own wagon, and you could upgrade the tires, or you could put your kid's name on it or your family's name on it, or and really, really trick out this wagon so it's higher end, and it just became really, really popular. And so then we expanded it to some other product categories too, like tricycles. And it's something you can only get at radioflyer.com. So that makes it really special.
So talking about the future, you started a relationship with Elon Musk and Tesla, which is amazing. And that really came about because there was a need for a good kind of battery operated car, right?
Yes. Yeah. Again, when our team did the research, on these battery operated vehicles for kids, really, we found people really like them. There wasn't a lot wrong with them, but the one recurring complaint was the battery's always dead and it takes forever to charge the battery. So our team said, well, we could fix that with lithium ion batteries. This was 7 years ago.
Wow.
And then we're like, well, hey, if it's going to be lithium ion batteries, let's partner with Tesla. Again, it was early days for Tesla. And so that's really where the idea came from. And it's been a terrific partnership.
Well, and it's great because you're talking about, kind of old school 100+ years and literally new school, right? And having a chance to have that marriage together, that's terrific. And I'm looking at your website now, and you have the ability to get different colors, and you could really trick out your Tesla, which is terrific.
Just like a real Tesla, you should buy it out. You design it online.
That's great. And then now I just read in Car and Driver, there's another model that you have for younger kids.
Yeah, the Model Y.
Okay.
That's right here. That's not electric. So this is a what we call foot to floor. So it's kind of Fred Flintstone style of
that's great.
Moving with your feet on the floor. So it's for little guys, and we launched that last year.
Awesome. We're gonna start wrapping up a little bit, but I can't let you go without talking about kind of this idea of leadership and now we've talked a little bit more. I found that this may have started younger in your younger years in college, taking on that responsibility of running for office. I mean, and now being able to transform an iconic brand into something that really is a great product, but more importantly, kind of taking it into the future. So, talk to me about kind of what your ideas are on leadership.
Well, I think the most important thing is to lead by example. Everybody says that and kind of blows past it, but really you have to demonstrate the behaviors that you want from your team. And there's no shortcuts to that. One of my mentors, Jerry Bell, says, everyone's watching you like a hawk. So you may think you're faking it. You can't fake it. People know. And so if you want people to act with integrity, you got to act with integrity. If you want to have people treat each other with kindness and respect, that's what you have to do. So it's pretty straightforward, but it's not easy to do. I mean, you're on stage. It's showtime. When you're a leader, it's showtime all the time. So if you don't want to be in the show, then you probably shouldn't be a leader.
I'd love to encourage folks to check out the website. Selfishly, do you give tours? Because I would love to kind of hang out in one of those rooms or go around a track or something like that. I mean, after all this COVID stuff is over.
We don't give tours, but you are always welcome as a VIP, Chris.
The one last thing I want to talk about, I know we have a couple minutes left, and I think it's serendipity, and it's interesting how we're faced with challenges, but you may not know it at the time, but you have the ability to kind of overcome them. And I want you to share a little bit about kind of what happened to Radio Flyer right before COVID hit. I mean, you wound up taking a sabbatical for 6 months. Like first of all, what started that, and kind of what was that experience? But then what folks may not know is that literally you ended it in February, and then boom, we have COVID. So talk a little bit about kind of that kind of adventure, so to speak.
It was good I had rested up. Yeah. I think the sabbatical was really my wife's idea. She had wanted to do something for a while where we did, and we lived in Mexico for 6 months, and it's not something I ever would have done without her urging. But I've been doing this for my job for almost 30 years, and never fully disconnecting from work, even on vacations and stuff. And that's because I love it. But I was starting to get concerned. Am I going to start to get stale? I want to make sure that I'm fresh. And so we took it, and it was an amazing experience. And the only reason that I could really do it, and I completely disconnected, I didn't check email, I didn't get any reports. It's because I have such a great team and a really seasoned leadership team that's been here with me for so long. And they are the ones that really made it possible. So, and the best thing about it, I think, for me was that I was able to let my mind wander. I wasn't a slave to the email and checking that all the time. And but yeah, when COVID hit, we were really, really concerned about, the fact that this was going to result in unemployment, people losing their jobs, and that would affect people's buying patterns. But what we found was it was really the opposite, because families couldn't go on vacation or go to the amusement park. They bought more of our products because, walk around the neighborhood with a wagon or a ride on a tricycle really became like a mini vacation during quarantine. So, and I think the best thing about it, though, was we got all these stories from people about how our products were a lifesaver. They use that term all the time, because my kids were bouncing off the wall, but then we went for a ride. And so we were really one of the lucky companies during this past year.
Wow. When people, and I'm sure you get inundated with photos of kids on their wagons, right?
Yes.
So as I was doing some research for it, I kind of wanted to like I have my own story with my radio wagon, but I love looking at kind of different stories. And recently, and this actually brought me to tears when I was watching it. There was a kid in a hospital, and he had his little buddy was in his radio flyer wagon, and you saw the tubes and everything hooked up to the. I don't know if you've seen this or not, but I mean, I'm sitting there, and it's about maybe 20 seconds long, 30 seconds long. I think the mom is filming it, and I'm sitting there watching it going, and I'm like, literally, tears are coming down my eyes going, oh my God. And here's this little kid kind of taking care and, of his buddy. And he has this iconic brand. And it's like, who knew? I'm kind of getting now. Wow. It's just, if folks haven't seen it, and I don't have the capabilities to show it, or else I would. But, it's great because it just kind of talks about kind of how kids are kids, and regardless of the circumstances, they'll always be kids.
Yeah. I think that's one of the that's one of the things that we love about our work here. I mean, we live for stories like that. I always say that radio flyer can be anything you imagine it to be, and it can take you anywhere you want to go. It's really a vehicle of the imagination, and yeah, I mean, although all those different uses of the product, it's just, we feel all so grateful to be part of something that does touch people's lives in a really positive way. Which,
again, kind of leads me to Take Flight. The movie was awesome. That was great. The idea behind that was kind of celebrating 100 years. But, I mean, did you see that as being some of your childhood? Or was this something was like, hey, this is a great concept. Let's see what we can do with it.
Yeah, we wanted to create an animated short film that was kind of a Pixar quality storytelling to celebrate the 100th anniversary. So I worked with an amazing director, Brandon Oldenburg, and we started kicking ideas around, and we quickly landed on this generational story of a grandpa, son, and grandson. And the fact that this grandkid is getting dropped off at his grandpa's, he thinks he's by the dad, who's very harried and distracted and checking his cell phone and busy, and kind of forgotten about how to play. The kid thinks he's going to have this boring day. They discover the wagon in the garage, and the grandpa takes the grandkid on this imagination adventure through their imagination, and then reminds the dad, what childhood is really all about. So we wanted to create something that really captures the experience that people have with Radio Flyer and what people love about Radio Flyer. And we were delighted that it turned out so well and actually won an Emmy, which was really fun.
That's awesome. And if folks haven't had a chance to check it out, please do, because it brought me back to when I was a kid. And anybody who watches that, they'll get a sense of kind of that excitement, the same sense that you'd get when you see when you're walking in your neighborhood or you're driving your car and you see a parent pulling their kid, and you automatically go, man, I remember when ... So I'm sure those are amazing stories that you have. Bro, this has been great, Rob, man. Thank you so much. I didn't plan on crying at then, so I do apologize.
I'm honored.
No, I'm supposed to be tough. I'm supposed to be some mean guy.
We always know it's the tough guys. It's the tough guys that are soft on the inside. We know that.
Well, this was awesome, man. Thank you so much. And I think what you've done as a company, as a leader, really was manifested by your grandfather. And I think having a chance to understand through your dad, through your family, kind of what it takes to kind of be successful, but doing it in a right way. And I think it's beyond evident when you had to make that choice and close down the factory, when no one really had any bad things to say about Radio Flyer or your family. And I think that is the ultimate level of respect and love that people have for where they work. And that's a rarity these days. I'm sure you've heard tons of stories, but understanding success, being able to do it the right way, and really doing it with integrity and compassion, I think are kind of lessons that you guys learned from your grandfather. So that's awesome.
Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. I'd like to thank everyone for watching on Facebook and YouTube, and most of all, my wonderful production team of my wife and daughter, Candy and Kylie, who produced and directed the show. You've been watching another episode of the Zorich Podcast. To watch our other podcasts, please check out my YouTube page at Chris Zorich 50 and click subscribe. Rob, thank you so much, man. This was awesome.
Thank you, Chris. It was great. It was so fun to be with you.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Of course, I got to say, go Irish.
Go Irish.